Welcome back to Canada Immigration Matters YouTube channel presented by Chugo Immigration Services. In today's video, we will show you a step-by-step guide on how to immigrate to Canada as a caregiver. As a registered Canadian immigration consultant, I receive many inquiries from both potential employers and foreign workers about how to immigrate to Canada as a caregiver. The process of immigrating to Canada can be complex, but with careful planning and preparation, it is possible to successfully navigate the process and establish a successful career in Canada. Obviously, it is hard to find qualified workers in Canada to care for some of the most precious people in our lives, our children and our elders. The Caregiver Program in Canada has changed a lot in the last decade, from the Live-In Caregiver Program to some of the pilot programs we have been seeing in recent times, including the changes to the legislation in 2014, and ending with the most significant amendments implemented in June 2019. A very significant change and improvement is the removal of the mandatory requirement for residence in the employer's home. Also, potential caregivers now have the opportunity to travel to Canada with their families. Following the closure of the interim pathway for caregivers, there are currently 2 immigration programs in operation that are specifically designed for caregivers living in Canada or from abroad who are interested in immigrating to Canada. These 2 programs were launched in 2019. Canada's 2 pilot immigration programs for caregivers are the Home Child Care Provider and Home Support Worker pilot programs. The pilot programs opened for applications in 2019, replacing the expired Caring for Children and Caring for People with High Medical Needs pilots, which have been criticized for keeping some workers stuck in abusive workplaces and apart from their families abroad. The Liberal government, which was not in office when those pilots were introduced in 2014, labeled them ineffective. Processing times for the 2 new caregiver pathways have been slow to start. However, in 2021, the government announced a new initiative to process at least 6,000 caregiver applications by the end of the year. The government states that it heard directly from caregivers and interested parties that the previous changes made in 2014 were not well understood. Many caregivers began working for families in Canada, only to find out later that they were not going to qualify for permanent residence under an existing program. Caregivers will now only receive a work permit if they have a job offer in Canada and meet standard criteria for economic immigration programs. Once working in Canada, caregivers will be able to begin gaining the required 2 years of Canadian work experience to apply for permanent residence. The Home Child Care Provider Pilot Program and the Home Support Worker Pilot Program offer caregivers the following benefits. Occupation-specific work permits, rather than employer-specific, to allow for a fast change of employers when necessary. Open work permits and/or study permits for the caregiver's immediate family, to help families come to Canada together, and a clear transition from temporary to permanent status, to ensure that once caregivers have met the work experience requirement, they will be able to become permanent residents quickly. These new pilot programs provide caregivers from abroad and their families with a clear, direct pathway to permanent residence in Canada. How do Canada's new caregiver programs work? The changes to the program are significant for all caregiver applicants, but we will mention the most important. The caregiver applies for permanent residence from the very beginning and their family will be included in their application. They will not be restricted to working for a specific employer, thereby eliminating abuse and exploitation of the caregivers by their employers. The employer will not need to submit a Labour Market Impact Assessment application to Service Canada, ESDC. This makes the job offer more user-friendly to the employers in need of caregivers. When the work permit as a caregiver is approved, the whole family including qualifying dependents can accompany the principal applicant to Canada. Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, established a cap of 2,750 visas per year for each of the 2 categories for a total of 5,500 Canadian immigration caregiver visas annually. This year, the cap for the first category, Home Child Care Provider, could be reached by the first quarter of 2023. The second category of caregivers, Home Support Workers, is still open. The requirements to apply are similar to the requirements for permanent residence and work permits. The application will be for both a work permit and permanent residence, which will be submitted at the same time to IRCC. The applicant must meet the requirements for a work permit in Canada, meaning specifically that they have the required experience as caregivers in one of the 2 streams, not codes 4411 or 4412. The work permit issued by IRCC to the applicant is an occupation-restricted open work permit, meaning the caregiver can work for any employer, but only as a caregiver, with no other occupation. The applicant must receive a genuine offer of employment from the employer, no LMIA required. The employment will have to be full-time, at least 30 hours per week, paid work with regular vacation time, and at the hourly rate established by IRCC for the occupation. Also, the job offer must be from a Canadian employer outside of Quebec. Language level requirement. The applicant must pass the IELTS or CLB language test in English or French and score a minimum CLB 5 in each skill: writing, reading, listening, and speaking. Education requirement. The applicant must have completed a post-secondary education of at least 1 year. If the degree or diploma was obtained outside of Canada, the applicant must first obtain the Educational Credential Assessment Report from an organization recognized by the IRCC. The report will show the equivalency of their credentials compared to Canadian credentials. Lastly, the whole family, if applicable, submitting the application must be admissible to Canada. IRCC will conduct a security background check for every family member that is 18 years or older. The whole family will also pass a medical test. A few reasons for inadmissibility to Canada might include security reasons, human rights violations, criminality including driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, use or sale of drugs, misrepresentation, previous removal order from Canada, financial reasons, meaning you and your family are not able to support yourselves, medical reasons, if previously been to Canada and not complied with the conditions, for example, one overstayed his or her status, studied or worked without a permit, etc. IRCC will review the permanent residence and work permit applications and, if the applicant and family meet the eligibility criteria, they will issue an open work permit for one of the 2 NOC codes, as stated above. Processing times for Canadian caregiver applications take approximately 12 months or longer for a successful foreign worker to receive a work permit. Therefore, employers who want to hire caregivers from abroad must plan ahead, as this might take some time. Now that you know more about how to immigrate to Canada as a caregiver, you can start planning your next steps. Applying for permanent resident status in Canada can be complicated to take on a loan. Chugo Immigration Services is here to guide you through the immigration application process every step of the way. If living and working in one of the best countries in the world sounds like a dream you want to pursue, don't hesitate to start the process. Canada needs more caregivers, and you could be one of them. If you meet the eligibility requirements and are interested in applying to immigrate to Canada as a caregiver, contact Chugo Immigration Services at 1-403-836-1861 on WhatsApp, or book a consultation for more information on how to apply. Disclaimer: the content of this page is provided as an information guide only. While every effort is made in presenting up-to-date and accurate information, no responsibility or liability is accepted by the owners of this channel for any errors, omissions, or outdated or misleading information on these pages or any site to which these pages connect or are linked. The information provided here is for information purposes and does not constitute legal advice. If you wish to retain our services, check out the descriptions below on how to book a consultation. That is all we have for you today. Thanks for watching the entire video. I hope the information will be useful to you. Until the next video, subscribe, like, and share.